My name is Chris, and a few years ago, my friends and I decided to go camping at a remote lake to celebrate the 4th of July. We had heard about the lake's serene beauty and thought it would be the perfect spot for a relaxing holiday away from the city. We arrived at the lake in the late afternoon, set up our tents, and gathered around a campfire to roast marshmallows and tell stories. As the sun began to set, we were mesmerized by the colors reflecting off the water, unaware of the terror that awaited us. As darkness fell, we noticed strange lights moving across the surface of the lake. At first, we thought they were reflections from our flashlights, but the lights seemed to have a life of their own, darting and swirling in eerie patterns. The air grew cold, and a dense fog began to roll in from the water, enveloping our campsite. Suddenly, we heard chilling sounds coming from the forest, a mix of whispers, cries, and footsteps. Our initial excitement turned to fear as we realized we were not alone. We huddled closer to the fire, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then, out of the mist, we saw a figure emerging from the lake. It was a woman, soaked and pale, with long dark hair hanging over her face. Her eyes were empty, staring straight at us with a look of sorrow and despair. We were frozen in terror, unable to move or speak. She slowly made her way toward us, her footsteps silent on the wet ground. As she got closer, we could see that her clothes were old-fashioned, tattered and dripping with water. She reached out a hand, and we could hear her whispering, "Help me." Her voice was soft, but filled with anguish. In that moment, we realized we were encountering the ghost of someone who had met a tragic end at the lake. In a panic, we grabbed our things and fled to the car, driving away as fast as we could. Once we were a safe distance away, we tried to make sense of what we had seen. The next day, we went to the local library to research the history of the lake. What we found sent chills down our spines. Years ago, a family had drowned in the lake on the 4th of July. The parents and their 2 children had gone out on a boat, only for it to capsize in a sudden storm. Despite a frantic search, their bodies were never recovered. Locals believed that their spirits still haunted the lake, especially on the anniversary of their deaths. We had encountered the ghost of the mother, forever searching for her lost children. The lights we saw on the water were said to be the spirits of the children, playing and trying to find their way back to shore. I grew up in a small town that took great pride in its 4th of July celebrations. Every year, the centerpiece of our festivities was the spectacular fireworks display, produced by the local firework factory, Bright Sparks. The factory was known for its state-of-the-art pyrotechnics and vibrant displays. People from neighboring towns would flock to see the show, unaware of the dark secret that lay beneath the factory's success. The events of one fateful 4th of July would change everything. It was the summer of 1985, and the town was buzzing with excitement. The workers at Bright Sparks had been working tirelessly to prepare for the grand display. As night fell, the townspeople gathered in the park, eagerly waiting for the fireworks to begin. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shattered the festive atmosphere. The sky lit up in a blaze of fire and smoke as the factory erupted in a massive explosion. People screamed and ran in all directions, trying to escape the chaos. The ground shook, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of burning chemicals. When the dust settled, the extent of the devastation became clear. The factory was reduced to rubble, and the surrounding area was scorched. Several workers had perished in the blast, and many others were injured. The town was in shock and mourning. In the days that followed, eerie stories began to emerge. Survivors and first responders reported hearing ghostly whispers and seeing apparitions of the workers who had died in the explosion. The site of the factory was cordoned off, but curious onlookers claimed to see ghostly figures wandering among the ruins. One night, while walking home, I saw a faint glow coming from the factory ruins. Intrigued, I approached cautiously. As I got closer, I saw a group of spectral figures, their faces twisted in anguish, reenacting the moments leading up to the explosion. I stood frozen in fear, watching as the ghostly workers moved in a silent, macabre dance. Terrified, I ran home and told my family what I had seen. They listened in disbelief, but over time, more and more townspeople reported similar encounters. The spirits of the factory workers seemed to be trapped, reliving their final moments in an endless loop. Determined to find answers, I delved into the history of the factory. I discovered that safety protocols had been neglected and the management had ignored warnings about the volatile chemicals they were using. The explosion was a result of negligence and greed. It was a warm July evening, and the fairgrounds were buzzing with excitement. Families spread out their blankets, children ran around with sparklers, and vendors sold popcorn and lemonade. As the sun set and the sky darkened, the anticipation for the fireworks grew. Little did anyone know, this night would be remembered for something far more sinister than fireworks. As the first fireworks burst into the sky, casting colorful lights over the crowd, strange things began to happen. Some people started to feel an unusual chill in the air, despite the summer heat. Then, out of the corner of their eyes, several spectators noticed ghostly figures moving among them, transparent shapes that seemed to flicker and fade, like the fireworks themselves. Whispers echoed through the crowd, soft and indistinct at first, then growing louder and more insistent. People turned to one another, asking if they had heard the voices too. Panic began to spread, as more people reported seeing the spectral figures. The ghostly apparitions seemed to emerge from the ground, their faces contorted in silent screams of agony. The fireworks continued to explode overhead, but the festive atmosphere had turned to one of fear and confusion. The crowd began to disperse, parents clutching their children and friends huddling together for comfort. The whispers grew louder, now clearly audible, and the ghostly figures more defined. It was then that the town's historian, Mr. Thompson, recalled a chilling piece of history about the fairgrounds. Long before it was a place of celebration, the land had been a cemetery, dating back to the early 1800s. Over time, the graves were forgotten, and the fairgrounds were built on top of the old burial site. It seemed the spirits of those buried there were disturbed by the annual celebrations. That year, the town decided to move the fireworks display to a different location, hoping to avoid a repeat of the terrifying events. But the legend of the phantom fireworks lives on.